Welcome to Low Tier Fun Tier, where I take a look at the Rank 1 lineup for a nation in War Thunder and pick out my favorite vehicles. I'm going to pick out my favorite fighter, bomber, striker, and premium aircraft in Rank 1 of the Swedish air tree and take them out into the chaos of arcade battles, since that's what everybody does at Rank 1. My pick for a fighter is the Fokker D.21-3. This plane came out of the mid-1930s and was the final single-engine fighter produced by the Fokker company that had become somewhat famous for its fighter aircraft that it designed and produced back in the First World War. The D-21 was a low-wing monoplane with an enclosed cockpit, which was slowly becoming the new normal for 1930s fighter designs, and it was exported to Finland as a major customer of the plane, which is why we have it in the Swedish air tree in War Thunder. The plane made a fairly good showing of itself in combat against the Soviet Union, but it ended up being phased out of frontline combat service by the middle of 1943, as it was quickly being outpaced by more modern aircraft. In War Thunder, this plane is highly effective in air combat down at Rank 1. It carries a set of 4 machine guns with a fairly typical selection of ammo belts, and it features very strong flight performance for what it is. The rudder is especially responsive, and overall, the D-21 is a highly agile dogfighter. I actually have a full review up in my normal format of the premium D-21 from Rank 2, so shameless plug to check that out. I'll put a link in a pinned comment, as much of it applies to this plane as well. Generally speaking, the high rate of fire on the machine guns lets you just absolutely firehose targets, even if the individual shots aren't very strong. Also, the excellent flight performance really makes this an effective close-in dogfighter out in Rank 1 air battles. You won't have any trouble using the Fokker D.21-3 to sort of anchor your lineup for Rank 1 combat. My pick for a bomber is the B-3C. This is actually a German Ju-68 licensed and built in Sweden. The Ju-68 itself was one of the mid-1930s German aircraft that was designed to fill dual military and civilian purposes, partly to help disguise Germany's rearmament under poorly mustachioed fascism. The plane was a competitor to the much superior HE-111, but it did see some combat service early on during the Spanish Civil War, though production of those early models was quickly abandoned after it proved pretty lackluster in actual combat conditions, and the work quickly began on upgrades. The Ju-68K was offered as an export model for several foreign customers, with Sweden actually going so far as to license production of the thing under the B3 designation. The specific version we have in the game is the Ju-68K-13, under the Swedish designation B3C, and was generally considered the highest performance bomber version of the original Ju-68. In War Thunder, this ends up being a very effective bomber for Rank 1. Not only does it get a torpedo, which is always awesome, but the selection of 50 and 250 kilogram bombs gives it a pretty good choice to attack strategic bases or go for a higher quantity of AI ground units. The gun turret coverage isn't the best, that is to say it's pretty average for a Rank 1 bomber, but the machine guns still do enough damage to bring down the biplanes and light fighters that you're likely to go up against. The bad news is that the flight performance is pretty awful, but it's a Rank 1 bomber, so you probably expected that. It's also a fairly large target and easy to hit in air combat, but the caveat to that is that a lot of the internal space is empty, and sometimes machine gun hits from low-tier fighters will just spark off without really doing any damage. Overall, this is a great pick for a Rank 1 Swedish bomber. Third is the J-11 biplane. Since there are no strike planes in Rank 1 for Sweden, you're getting a second fighter. Deal with it. The J-11 is the Swedish version of the legendary Italian CR-42 Falco, which is often considered to be one of the top 2 or 3 biplane fighters ever built. It was also one of the last, and saw some fairly extensive use by Italy before and during the Second World War. Sweden ended up as a major export customer for the CR-42, which they designated as the J-11, and the first planes arrived in early 1940. During the war, Swedish J-11s saw very little action, mostly being used for routine patrols, but there were occasional interceptions to escort foreign planes out of Swedish airspace. The Swedes were realistic about advancing technology and understood the biplane to be a stopgap measure at best, and retired them from frontline roles as soon as more modern aircraft became available. In War Thunder, the J-11 is a butcher, just like the CR-42. This is easily one of the best 2 or 3 biplane fighters in the game, and with a little practice, it's almost unbeatable in a one-on-one dogfight. The only real drawbacks are that it's fairly easy to shoot down if somebody can connect hits, and it's got somewhat low firepower, but the aiming pip you get out in arcade battles makes it pretty easy to get accurate medium-range shots, and even though the guns are objectively low power, there's still more than enough to bring down a lot of the other planes you're going up against in Rank 1. With only a small amount of practice, this thing can easily be one of your best performing fighters in the first couple of ranks of the Swedish tech tree. And even though it's slower than most of the monoplane fighters, it can take out almost anything that's dumb enough to get close. Lastly, my pick for a premium, the AR-196A5. The AR-196 was designed in the mid-1930s as a bid to replace earlier biplanes in the maritime floatplane role. Its performance ended up being surprisingly good, and despite being designed in 1936, it actually served all the way until the end of World War II. The plane's role was primarily getting launched off of battleships to serve as a scout and gunnery spotter, and it also found some utility use for search and rescue and light transport. In service, it proved easy to maintain, simple to fly, and despite being slow, it was generally considered good enough in its various roles that no replacement was even requested by the time the war ended. Over 500 of them were built, primarily serving with Germany and Finland, with captured examples flying into the mid-1950s. In War Thunder, we're looking at the A5 version of the plane. This features some surprisingly impressive firepower for a Rank 1 plane, a pair of machine guns along with a pair of 20mm cannons, and a fairly useful rear-facing gunner with another machine gun. It also has above-average utility for a Rank 1 float plane, and believe it or not, this thing can fight fairly well in a lot of one-on-ones. War Thunder classifies this as a light bomber, and it does have a couple of small bombs that you can use for attacks of opportunity. But in my opinion, using this in arcade battles actually gives you a really capable multi-role aircraft that can do air combat or ground attack. Another bonus with this plane is that it's actually really tough, and a lot harder to shoot down than you might expect. But there's one big weakness to keep in mind. It's really slow, which means that sometimes you just won't be able to choose your engagements as reliably as with other planes. Still, it's a great performer, and out in Rank 1 air battles, it won't let you down. Well, that about wraps it up for Low Tier Fun Tier and the Swedish Air Tree. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this playlist.